Welcome to the Street Commission's December 11th regular commission meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating in accordance with public health guidelines. I would like to introduce Complete Streets Commission members and city staff present. I'm Chair Sally Cole. Commissioners present include Brian Altman, Meredith Bergen-Bailey, Athena Irakomos, Lisbeth King, and Matthew Raskoff. Commissioner absent include Jackie Sebrian. City staff present include Kevin Chen and Katrine Maki. Kevin, would you please provide instructions to the commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Cole and members of the Complete Streets Commission. Welcome everyone to the December 11th Complete Streets Commission meeting, and thank you for attending. For members of the public who wish to provide public comments for any items on tonight's agenda, after the chair calls for public comment on that item, virtual attendees on Zoom may engage the raise hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, dial 9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. And that concludes the instruction, and I return the meeting back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Moving on to reports and announcements, city staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. Kevin, do you have any reports and announcements?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just give me 1 second here. Just a couple of quick announcements for the benefit of the commission. So as some of you may know, the City Council accepted the Coleman and Ringwood Avenue Transportation Study, the final report, and also supported the one-way pilot on Coleman Avenue. So the next step is really for the county to do their part. Of course, more to come for that project, as you all know. Also, we have a new mayor and vice mayor from last night's City Council meeting. Our new mayor for next year is Council Member or Mayor Drew Combs, and the new vice mayor is our former Council Member Betsy Nash, or now Vice Mayor Betsy Nash. The other item that I also wanted to kind of briefly bring to your attention is that the City Council also received an information item on the comprehensive shuttle study, which is actually set to go to the City Council next Tuesday, so December 17th. So to do the acceptance of the study, the item last night was just an info item, including a brief summary of the discussion that happened with the commission at the last meeting. So with that, I will conclude my reports and announcements. Thank you.
So the brief summary was included in the City Council staff. Okay, thank you. Moving on to public comment. Under this public comment section, members of the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject that is not listed on tonight's agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. You are not required to provide your name or city of residence, but it is helpful. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Kevin, can you please call for public comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So for virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment on items not listed on tonight's agenda, you may engage the raise hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press 9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. I do see one virtual hand raised. It is Bill Kirsch. So Bill, I believe I have allowed you to permission to speak. So if you want to go ahead and speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Commissioners, thanks much for your diligent work in helping our city. I had a comment and a question. I served on the Complete Streets Commission for 4 years. I chaired for a year. And I recall that folks that I would talk to about the complete streets had no idea what a complete street was. And recently, I think the city has embraced this concept of slow streets. And I thought, wow, that'd be a great name for the complete streets to recast themselves as slow streets. So I just offer a citizen's suggestion to rename your commission Slow Streets, and that people would know exactly what your mission is. Anyway, so I throw that out there. I live in Allied Arts. My street, Partridge, suffers the majority of cut-through traffic that's trying to make their way to El Camino Real. And Kevin, question for you. I had asked you by email, where did College Avenue get those slow street signs? We desperately need that on Partridge Avenue. And I haven't heard back from you. Maybe you're still looking into it, but if somebody can please help me, we need to have those signs. If the city's going to do nothing else for us for a long time, we would love to have those signs on our street as well, on both ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirsch.
Kevin, I'll talk to you after the meeting about that. I observed those signs.
Yep.
I think I know what he's talking about. Okay, thank you, Bill. No other public comment?
No.
All
thank you.
right, thank you. So we'll move on to regular business. Under regular business, the commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. The first regular business tonight is E1, accept the Complete Streets Commission minutes for November 13th of 2024. Is there any clarification from the commission before I take public comment? I have some feedback, but should I say it after public comment? Is this not clarification?
Yeah, sorry. Let's save that for after the public comment.
All right. If there's no clarification from the commission, let's ask Kevin to call for public comments on this item.
Great, thank you. So for virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment on the minute, you may engage the raise hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press 9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. I am not seeing any hands raised virtually, so I return the meeting back to the chair.
Okay, so I had some input, and of course, if other commissioners do as well, that's welcome. This was a meeting, I think some of the folks here might not have been present, so just to refresh, this was a meeting where we were here quite late, till 9:30, diving very deeply into the comprehensive shuttle study and giving specific feedback in a very long motion around the content that and data that we wanted to be added to the report before it was submitted to City Council. So, excuse me one sec. Yeah, hold on. Couldn't tell where it was coming from.
My apologies, that was my mistake. So
That's all right. No worries at all. So moving on with this. So basically, I thought that the motion as it was summarized, and I know it was a long motion late at night, but the motion is summarized with bullet points in the minutes. I didn't think quite reflected the phrasing of the motion when I thought the phrasing was important. So I actually went back to the video and I wrote down how we had phrased it. And I, in interest of making a motion and approving it, I can read that. But and I know it was probably very challenging to be writing it down during the meeting, but I think what was important about the phrasing was that we did say that our recommendation was based on the staff including the following additional information for content. So we were making our approval contingent on that. So I think that's a pretty strong way of saying it. And I think that some of the phrasing didn't quite capture the point. So I'm now going to just say how I would phrase it based on my verbatim record of the video. And if others think this is a good way of phrasing it in the minutes, and Kevin, if you agree, then we'll maybe replace this with what's in there. So our motion was we recommended that the report be presented to City Council with the following additions to the content. 1, information about ridership by type of shuttle. 2, information about cost per ride by type of shuttle. 3, state that the 3 cities that were cited in the staff report, in the report, that operate their commuter shuttles by TMAs, and that those TMAs, and be clear that those TMAs are funded partly by an assessment on property owners and businesses to pay for that shuttle. And as an aside, that was important to us because we wanted the council to know that that was a funding mechanism being used in neighboring communities. 4, an acknowledgement that increased ridership can only be achieved through increased marketing and outreach to the public, because in the report, it stated that there was a lack of awareness expressed in the survey. And finally, we, the commission, did not recommend stopping the free shuttle to people with accessibility needs unless the staff in their report to the council provide information demonstrating that existing services will take care of those people's needs, because the commission was not presented with that information. So again, I'm happy to write this out, and send it. I don't expect anyone else to do that work, but I think that's a bit different, and I understand it was being condensed, but I think the wording was important. So if everyone's all right with that, I can make a motion to adopt the wording as I read it from the motion. Does that seem okay?
Yeah.
Not really.
No, I think the bullet points themselves, I'm comfortable with your verbiage right there. The only thing that I wanted to kind of confirm is
Sure.
the how those bullet points are attached to the acceptance of the report, because at the end of the day, so when the next item that we're going to the city council, at a
Yes.
minimum, we'll be asking the city council to accept the report,
Yes.
because the report in of itself has all the alternatives with a preferred alternative being recommended. And the item when we came to the commission had a similar structure where we're asking the commission to sort of recommend to the city council to accept the report.
I see. Mhm.
And then so that's why it was worded that way with
Yes.
the focus on the following items. So my only recommendation would be, I believe the way you phrased it was to present, if you don't mind repeating the very first sentence.
Well, what if we say motion and second, excuse me, this is the minutes, this is how we would phrase it in these minutes.
Right.
Motion and second to accept the study.
Mhm.
And here it says with more focus on the following items.
Right,
And I think it should say something like with inclusion of these items
with inclusion, okay.
in the city report going to city council.
Right, yes. Yeah, and
Like
the reason why
XYZ.
we use with more focus is because many of the items are already in the report, but we
Like in the
through
appendix
through
or
the
something.
CSC, what we're gonna do is we're pulling them out and make them more obvious
Okay.
in the staff report itself.
So how
Yeah.
about if we just say to accept the study highlighting the following items?
I think, yeah, I think that's that.
And then the
makes-
list that I
And then the
gave?
list itself, I am comfortable with those verbiage, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do the people who were present at the meeting feel that that's a
I
appropriate way
have,
to-
I have a concern.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
The last bullet point where we talk about other ways to fund the
Yeah.
commuter shuttle. My big fear with this is that this is going to go forward and they will accept the study, review the alternatives, and then lock in one of those presented alternatives. And we really didn't review other ways to fund it or touch upon the length of the contract, which was really concerning to me, that we're just coming off of a 10-year contract and we might go into another 10-year contract with extremely low ridership and high usage rates in terms of costs. So on the last one, I would like it to say something along the lines of, and consideration of other ways to fund the shuttle and review of terms and length of contract.
So I think, I could be wrong, but I think because we didn't include that in the motion at the meeting, and the minutes are simply to record what
Oh.
we included, I would recommend, Lisbeth, you said it was at next Tuesday's meeting? Yeah, I would recommend, if you can, to go to either write to the CC inbox,
Yeah.
CCI inbox,
Mhm.
right? Or go to the meeting and say, I'm a member of the commission, I was at the meeting and I didn't think there was enough attention on X and Y, or I think that it's important that we have this information, and bring up that other point that we didn't put in the
Okay,
motion.
is that what would you recommend as well?
Yeah, I would certainly recommend that as well, because the goal with of the study is also to illustrate the various options that we have given the various financial conditions, either a increase in cost by the operator or a decrease in funding. Excuse me. So, therefore, there was a prefer and then a kind of reduce and a future. So I think the report itself is trying to capture as much of that as possible. I think pertaining to what your comment is, I do agree with the chair that I would recommend either the vice chair both write and or attend the meeting to express that specific bullet point or that
Yeah,
specific
I
point.
guess what I'm also came out of our last meeting very unclear on is what's the protocols? We put
Mhm.
this motion forward, they go and review it at city council, say that they approve the study. What's the next step?
Right,
I
yeah.
don't know. I'm really asking that. I don't know. What happens? Do they start putting RFPs out?
I just reviewed the staff report because I was confused as well. And so the action right now coming before council is just to accept the report so that it can be closed out and reimbursed from a grant. And it's yet to be released what the future grant amounts is going to be. So in the staff report to council that I was reading, that was the information item from last night, I was separating them out. And we don't really want council to make a decision about the shuttle at all yet because we don't have all the information.
Okay,
And so it will just be to accept the report.
okay.
And then the staff is gonna find out our information, figure out what grants we're eligible for, see what the cost is gonna come back to be for
Okay.
this next one, and come back with more information.
Okay.
And then make a decision.
So there is a whole second layer of review
Absolutely.
that comes
Yes.
to us and then them.
Yes.
That, okay, that was not at all clear in our last meeting. Thank you for making that clear.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you for the conversation around this, just for the clarification. I think it's helpful. And so what we'll do is I'll make a motion to accept the minutes with the altered language we discussed, saying that we accepted the study report, going to the city council, highlighting the following items in the list of items that I read. Based on that motion, do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Aracomas. And then should we take a vote then on the minutes? Accepting the minutes? action?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So we do have a motion and a second on the table. Commissioners that were in attendance, which in this case would be all commissioners except Commissioner Roscoff. If you'd like to vote yes to the motion, if you can please raise your hand, or the modified motion, sorry, the motion with the modification to the minutes. Great, I'm seeing all hands raised. And then Commissioner Roscoff, I assume will be an abstention from you? Yeah, okay, thanks.
All right then. Thank you. So moving on to E2, regular business. Provide feedback on Middle Avenue and El Camino Real intersection signal and conceptual geometric improvements. I would like to introduce Kevin Chen, our senior transportation engineer, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Where's there you go. I keep forgetting about that one. Okay. Sorry, you should be seeing, give me 1 second here. Yeah. Okay, sorry about that. You would think by now I know exactly how this works, but I still don't. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Kevin Chen, Senior Transportation Engineer with the City of Menlo Park. Happy to be here tonight to present this item in front of you. It's been a long time coming. Many of you know the history behind the project, but still I'm going to take a few minutes just to go over some of the background information about the project, dive into the evaluation that have taken place since then, some of the feedbacks that we're hoping to get from the commission tonight, and then finally the next steps for this particular element of the project. So as you all know, this is an image from on Middle Avenue in El Camino Real, a view from eastbound Middle Avenue looking east toward 500 El Camino, or the Middle Plaza, if you will. So as many of you know, the item before you tonight, the intersection of Middle and El Camino, is one of many elements within the Middle Avenue Complete Streets project. A little bit of the background: back in March of 2021, when the City Council had their agenda setting priority meeting, they directed staff to combine what used to be two projects, the Middle Avenue Traffic Calming Project and then the Middle Avenue Bike Lane Project, into one that is now called the Middle Avenue Complete Streets Project. We also received direction from the City Council to initiate the project and to bring that forward to hopefully fruition in the near future. In October of 2022, after years of community outreach and meetings and talking with stakeholders, the City Council was able to approve a list of traffic calming measures for the entire stretch of Middle Avenue. So in this case, we're talking about Middle Avenue from Olive to El Camino Real. Many of you might recall the list includes raised crosswalks, one speed hump, speed feedback signs, flashing beacons, all elements that is intended to reduce the traffic speed and hopefully cut through traffic along Middle Avenue. Another element, as I mentioned before, the buffer bike lane, was also approved by the City Council in May of 2024. The buffer bike lane, we were able to successfully install a buffer bike lane by removing parking on both sides of Middle Avenue, thus creating a very wide and comfortable bicycle network along the entire corridor. From the Middle Avenue Complete Streets project, we also were able to complete two ongoing pilot projects. The first one is the closure of Blake Avenue to Middle Avenue. So this is a request that we have received as part of the project, was ongoing at the time from Blake Street residents, and then subsequently received approval from the City Council to proceed as a pilot. Additionally, we were able to receive approval from the City Council to do a conversion of the Neyland Park frontage parking. As many of you remember, the original configuration in front of Neyland Park was a 90-degree perpendicular parking space. So when we bring the project to the commission and the City Council back in 2023, we also received a approval to test out a pilot where we converted those perpendicular parking spaces into parallel parking spaces. Doing so allow us to have a bike lane to go behind the parking spaces. Of course, that also meant a reduction in terms of parking count. Through many of our public meetings, the feedback that we received from the community was the parking demand along Neyland Park was very high, and we really need a way to kind of increase that supply a little bit more. Additionally, those parallel parking spaces were creating safety hazards where folks that are dropping off their kids, the door swings are swinging to both coming vehicles as well as bicycle traffic on the other side as well. So to address those two comments, we went back to the City Council, and I believe we came to the Complete Streets Commission as well for approval of modifying the pilot into what is now out there, the backing angle parking pilot, which is a first for the city. The installation was completed in November of 2024, and we continue to monitor the situation out there, making sure that everybody is doing so safely. And then as well as continue our education component, as I mentioned, it is the first for the city. So many folks that may be driven by the area might not be familiar with how a backing angle parking functions. So we're doing our part to make sure that we educate the public as much as we can. So for the main project that we're going to discuss tonight, there are, as the chair had mentioned through the title, there are two specific elements that we are presenting in front of you tonight. One is regarding the signal operation. The other one is a geometric recommendation or improvement. I'm going to focus the next few slides on the signal operation and then the last few slides on the geometric operation. What's in front of you are two exhibits that show two of the key elements we're trying to resolve with the signal operation. The first one is to remove a conflict between left turning vehicles coming from Middle Avenue turning left onto El Camino Real. And the conflict really occurs when those vehicles are making that left turn. They are conflicting with oncoming traffic. So in this case, if you're coming from, say, Safeway Plaza, you have to wait for vehicles that are coming from the Middle Avenue or the Middle Plaza coming straight down. Additionally, those left turning vehicles are also in conflict with any pedestrians or bicyclists that are crossing El Camino Real. So you can see right there, there are essentially two conflict points in the exhibit to your left here, where the vehicles are making a left turn, ped and bikes are crossing that crosswalk. So that's one of the elements that we're trying to resolve, one of the conflicts. The other one that we received through community feedback was a desire to explore a no right turn on red operation for Middle Avenue. In this case, the no right turn on red would benefit pedestrians that are crossing Middle Avenue on El Camino Real. As many of you know, it's in the state of California, you are allowed to make a left turn on a red after you come to a stop. So in this case, that effectively the operation would be that would no longer be permitted. As a right turning vehicle, you have to wait for your green in order to make a left, in order to make a right turn. So to properly study those scenarios, staff came up with 4 total different alternatives, including the existing. So the table to your left is a quick demonstration of the study alternatives that we have done. First one, obviously, being the existing, followed by 4 different alternatives. To your right is a quick exhibit that demonstrates some of the differences. For example, for alternative 1, we're simply doing an existing with no right turn on red operation. With alternative 2, we're trying to address that left turn conflict by converting the signal from a permissive phase to a protected phase. And if you look at the picture to your right, the permissive phase is where you have the red, yellow, and green ball, which many of you as drivers know that means if you're making a left turn with that signal, you have to yield to the pedestrians or oncoming traffic. In this case, alternative 2 is looking for a way to make that into a protective phase, which means as a left turning vehicle, you are now seeing a red, yellow, or green arrow. So that means you have the right of way. Again, not a very common practice in terms of driving behavior, and many of you as drivers know exactly how that operates. Alternative 2 and alternative 2A, the main difference between the two, one has no right turn on red, one does not. So basically one allows the current practice of turning right on red. Alternative 2A, alternative 2 simply means no protective phase plus no right turn on red. We also received a comment to explore a dedicated bike signal phase. In order to do so, obviously, we're going to have to restrict no right turn on red, because in order for a signal phase, for a bike signal phase to happen, we need to eliminate all potential conflicting phases. In this case, that would mean the right turn. So a lot of text here. Hopefully this entire table is also included in the staff report. So hopefully you had a chance to digest that before the meeting. But here I just wanted to quickly highlight some of the key elements that we're trying to resolve with many of these alternatives. Obviously, each one of them is doing a little bit more than the other. Alternative one, simply trying to have existing conditions with no right turn on red. Our expectation with that operation is that we obviously gonna see more queuing along Middle Avenue because those right turning vehicle cars that used to be able to turn on red, they can no longer do so. As a result of that, we would expect that particular queue length to lengthen. Alternative two, one of the advantage that we can do with both 2 and 2A is to resolve that left turning conflict. With 2, obviously there's the additional no right turn on red, which would resolve the 2 bullet points that we're trying to address. And with alternative 3, where we have a dedicated bike signal phase, just another added layer of protection for the bicycle community there. In terms of the queuing results, the next 2 figures will demonstrate what each of the alternatives would do in terms of the queuing for the intersection. Here's just a numeric representation. The next couple of slides will have a graphical representation of the queuing conditions under each of the alternatives. So here is an exhibit showing the morning commute hour. The illustration in front of you here is a representative of the 95 percentile queue. What that simply means is that basically if you look at the study of an hour, X amount of cycle time through an hour, 95% of the time, this is what you're seeing. Now, some of you might be more familiar with averages, average queues. You can simply sort of half this, if you will, maybe like 60%, 40% split. That will give you sort of your more typical average queue. But in this case, staff wanted to demonstrate what 95% of the, so basically 95% of the time, this is sort of the maximum queue that you would see. In terms of for the legends, just for the benefit of the commission, the red represent existing condition, so what's out there right now. The blue represents existing plus no right turn on red. As you can see, we're expecting those vehicles queue, especially along Middle Avenue, to continue. The reason why the blue in this case has an arrow because it essentially goes outside of the boundary. Not that much more, but it does go outside of the boundary. Alternative 2 is the protected phase plus a no right turn on red. So as you can see, very similar to blue because they both have no right turn on red operations. Alternative 2A is a protected phase with a right turn on red allowance. So as you can see, this one is longer than existing, but shorter than alternative 2 or alternative A. I'm speaking just solely on Middle Avenue right now, not taking into account El Camino. And of course, alternative 3, where we're installing a bike signal on top of the protected left, on top of the no right turn on red. This one obviously created a much longer queue than the other scenarios. Hopefully, as demonstrated through the numeric table. Some other things I do want to highlight here is what alternative 3, because of the addition of a bike signal, that generally means the entire cycle length of the signal would need to be lengthened. Essentially, we're trying to, when you have a bike signal, you're trying to make sure that the bike signal gets right away. And that generally means the bike signal has to have its own phase. There are other ways to be able to kind of design around that by making a lot of no right turn on red, et cetera. But for the simplicity of this study, what our assumption was we added a new bike signal phase on top of what's out there right now. So as you can see, it essentially kind of lengthens some of the queues around the area as well. So this is a illustration of the queue, again, the 95 percentile queue. This is for the evening commute hour. Fairly similar story, if you will. The existing condition being represented by red. Generally speaking, each of the alternatives would sort of lengthen what's out there right now. Generally with alternative 2A kind of representing the best of the worst case scenarios of all the scenarios. Again, this mainly has to do with the fact that 2A does not have a no right turn on red restriction versus alternative 1, 2, and 3. They all have a no right turn on red restriction. So moving on to the next topic, geometric recommendations. This is really a recommendation that the City Council and many of the community have a desire to explore, which is to improve the existing pedestrian and bicycle conditions. As you all know, or you can see from the illustration in front of you, crossing El Camino is a very, very long crossing. And in addition to that, you also have to compete with the vehicles making a left turn, which hopefully we can address through the signal operation change. However, it still doesn't really change the fact that it is a longer crossing to cross El Camino Real. So as a result of that, staff explored a couple high-level improvements that we could do there. This right here is in the industry term called a protected intersection, or in this case, protected corners, because we only have 2 of the 4 corners that we are talking about here. The main illustration that we're trying to do here is that this is generally a design that would allow us to have a protected area for the bicyclists as they're waiting to make a turn. So if you are if you're coming from the 500 El Camino, the middle plaza, crossing El Camino, and then hopefully going south onto El Camino, you have that little island right there to protect you from any turning vehicles that are coming from southbound El Camino Real, or left turning vehicles coming from northbound El Camino Real. So hence the word protected. Here, the design is really to be able to allow those bicyclists that are waiting at the corner to have a protected area away from traffic. Of course, doing so really requires a lot of right-of-way, which we currently do not have at the intersection of El Camino and Real. As you can see from my illustration above, we're essentially maxing out all of our public right-of-way to make those existing improvements out there, which generally means if we want to do this, one of the disadvantage of a protected intersection is that it requires a bigger footprint. Similar to many of you probably know, if you want to build a roundabout, it typically is bigger than a regular intersection. Similar concept here, to build a protected intersection, you generally need a bigger footprint. So in this case, in order to build something like this, there is a very high potential that we'll need some sort of right-of-way acquisition from either from both the Safeway Plaza and the Shell gas station, or maybe come up with some sort of an easement agreement, which many of those, obviously, if you're in the industry, you know those will take forever, if at all, maybe sometimes impossible to do so. Additionally, there will be definitely some utility conflicts. For example, we'll definitely need to modify the existing signal system that's out there, which includes streetlights, signal heads, potentially even the cabinets, which is currently located at the Safeway corner. We most likely will need to address underground utility conflicts. For example, the storm drain will most definitely be impacted. Potentially some sewer or water line that may need to be addressed as well. Those are less certainty at this point because of the fact that maybe they could be a little bit more off the curb. And if they're off the curb, maybe there's a possibility that there's no conflict there. However, we do anticipate for sure that there will be storm drain, underground utility conflicts with this design. Again, this is simply a high-level illustration of a potential design that we want to share with the commission to address that safety concern that we have received from the public comments. Okay, so two more slides, and then I'll be able to kind of conclude the presentation. As I mentioned before, we are here to seek feedback from the commission. We have a signal operation improvement, a geometric improvement that we're presenting in front of you tonight. With the signal, the feedback that we're hoping to get from the commission tonight is whether or not there's a preferred alternative that the commission have in mind for us to proceed with further analysis. One thing I failed to mention is that the intersection of El Camino and Middle is a Caltrans-owned intersection. So anything we want to do there would require the blessing of Caltrans. And just from my personal experience, I can tell you that anything that is related to signal, there's going to be a lot of work, a lot of analysis, a lot of design element that goes into that, which is why we are hoping to get a preferred alternative rather than try to proceed with all the alternatives. The amount of manpower just will make it very much infeasible. In terms of the geometries, just wanted to get some feedback from the commission, whether or not the commission felt like there is a desire to continue with some of the conceptual analysis. Like I mentioned before, the illustration in front of you, strictly a very high level conceptual design that is something that we can offer to for the commission to review. Again, we wanted to make sure that the commission is aware of some of the constraints that we'll certainly be running into, utility, for example, right of way, for example. So whether or not there's a desire to continue down that path, or if whether or not there's some additional information that the commission would like to see before we make that final decision. So in terms of next steps, again, hoping that tonight we'll be getting some feedback from the commission tonight. We'll go back to the drawing board, incorporate those feedback into a final product, and then we'll be presenting that product to the city council. We're also hoping that with, at least with the signal operation portion of the recommendation, to talk to our counterparts at Caltrans to get an understanding of exactly the scale and the scope that would be necessary to make that type of improvement. So again, if we can come out of the meeting tonight with a preferred alternative, then we'll be sharing that information with our Caltrans colleagues as well to get more information about exactly what that approval process will look like. And ideally, we will present that to the city council as well. So while our desire is to present this item to the city council as soon as we can, there will certainly be some legwork that would be necessary before we get to that point. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and happy to answer any clarifying questions.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, are there any clarifying questions from the commission before I take public comment? Commissioner Bailey.
I have a couple, Kevin. My burning question is, I know we have talked about an underpass or an overpass connecting Middle, I believe, to the new apartment complex. How would that play into what we're talking about tonight?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So I believe the main point here is try to understand where El Camino, the intersection of El Camino and Middle fall within the overall network. So as many of you know, we have Middle Avenue, the Complete Streets project. We have hopefully in the near future or in the future have an underground passing or that will connect Burgess to the current 500 El Camino Real development, the Middle Avenue Plaza development. As it is currently designed and accepted conceptually by the city council, the undercrossing would bring bikers and pedestrians from the Burgess side onto the back of the 500 El Camino Real. So if you imagine the sort of kind of, if I can use this illustration here to the right, where the bridge icon is, it basically sort of lands along El Camino Real. That's probably a little too simplified. It's probably going to be more landing, well, not probably. The landing area would actually be sort of the back, more closer to where the fence is, near the track. So effectively, if that undercross was to be built, a pedestrian or a bicyclist would cross the train track using the undercrossing. They would come up 500 El Camino Real, and they would ride through the current plaza with where the foundation is, the fountain is, and then cross the El Camino Real. So that's why part of the reason why, from a geometric change perspective, we elected to kind of focus on the two corners, the Safeway corner and the Shell gas station corner, and then not yet focusing on the other two corners because they've just been recently improved with the 500 El Camino Real project. But hopefully that answers the question.
It does, thank you. And I think it actually makes what we're talking about today even more important, because with that underpass, I would anticipate even more cyclists being interested in using this intersection, in using Middle as part of their biking route. have we, the city, counted the amount of cyclists currently using this route?
Currently on Middle Avenue or?
Correct, just like average, like during peak commute hours. I don't know what that is. I'm just curious as to, I don't know. What it currently is, maybe what we would anticipate with the new apartments coming online. And then with the underpass, again, I think more and more people will be interested in it as a commute route, as a school route. I'm just curious if we have any numbers or projections on that, and that might be a little nitty gritty for this point in the project, but I was curious.
Yes, so we do have some number, some average daily number that we counted from when we were doing the Middle Avenue project. If a Middle Avenue Complete Streets project, if you don't mind, give me a couple of minutes. I'm going to see if I can try to pull that number.
I'm delighted that you have it. Thank you.
From the exhibit for you. While I'm doing that, we do also anticipate, and I think to the point that you had mentioned, given where that undercrossing is located, which is between Ravenswood and Sandhill, we definitely anticipate to attract more riders that are currently either using Santa Cruz or Oak Grove to use that undercrossing. So we certainly expect that number to go higher than what was counted previously. So my apologies, if you can just give me 1 second. I can give you that number real quick. Okay, so study. Here we go. So the number of bicyclists that we survey through the Middle Avenue Complete Streets project, approximately 200 bikers on an average day.
Total throughout the day.
Total throughout the day,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you, Commissioner Bailey. Any other clarifying questions before we take public comment?
I had sorry,
Yes.
it's a similar question, which is, I know Caltrans has a project to repave and repaint El Camino. It was discussed in Palo Alto recently. They're working on it there. Do we know what the current status of their thinking is for the Menlo Park section of El Camino and how this project might relate with their interests in El Camino and its intersections?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. As far as I know, our section of El Camino Real was repaved likely about 10 to 15 years ago, if I remember correctly, which means it most likely will not, Caltrans will not come in and repave El Camino again for another 10 to 15 years or so. So I would say, generally speaking, the approach that they took with Palo Alto is unlikely to be happening in Menlo Park in the near future.
Sure.
Kind of piggybacking off of Commissioner Raskoff's question, with the potentiality of adding bike lanes to El Camino Real, I don't know exactly where we are with that in Menlo Park. Would that be tying in to this project in any way?
As it's currently structured, I would not see any need to tie in those two projects. Our focus right now is on the signal operation. The geometric recommendation is currently a very high-level conversation. As I mentioned before, if there's even a desire to move forward, there's going to be a lot of steps that need to take place before we even get to a design. So at least for staff's, our goal is to be able to proceed with at least the signal operation, because that one is a little bit, relatively speaking, easier to achieve compared to the conceptual design for the geometric. Yep.
I think maybe Commissioner King, were you going to
Yep,
speak
I
before?
had a
Okay,
question.
do you mind, Commissioner King?
I just had a clarifying question. I'm looking at what looks like slide number 13. It says page E 2.9 at the bottom. And I'm trying to gain an understanding of the cyclists who might be turning. I'm looking at the location of the fountain, and that might be where the underpass is on
That
the
one,
opposite
yep.
side of El Camino. And if there's cyclists that are wanting to turn left on El Camino, are they going to be, how are they going to be doing that? Are they going to be going behind the cars in the left turn lane? Are they going to be following the cyclist passage and crossing and then going? Can you clarify that for me?
So in this case, you're talking about, say, bicyclists that are coming out of the Middle Plaza area, try to make a left onto southbound El Camino Real. Yeah. Using sort of a very traditional way of thinking would be, it could be both, right? A bicyclist with more experience, more comfort, they're certainly allowed to, wait behind a vehicle and then making a left turn from the vehicle lane. Someone maybe that's less experienced and feels more safe using the crosswalk, they would then kind of do that traditional crossing each of the crosswalks. So basically 2 crosswalks to go south. So in this case, that's where sort of that geometric improvement is being recommended here. It is essentially providing a safer waiting area for those folks that are trying to make that left turn using that approach.
Understood. Thank you.
Commissioner Altman?
On 2A, 2A expands the queue on middle. Obviously, expanding the queue on middle is not good, but also spillover on the parallel streets like College and Partridge, and the community's brought up that that's an issue in of itself. Any expansion of the queue might result in additional cars going down those side streets. Is that part of the analysis so far? And follow-up question to that is 2A expands the queue a little bit. Why does it expand the queue? Is it just the timing of the lights?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. So for the first, it's currently not part of this study. However, it is a very much a point that is very well taken and something that we'll know for sure. As you know, whenever there's a long queue, folks are going to start looking for alternative ways to get to their destination. And that's just sort of how traffic flows. And that is certainly something that we're going to have to recognize as well as we proceed with that next selection of design alternatives. It is understanding that if we pick one that will create longer queues, then that means it's more likely that we're going to see some cars that are driving through the neighborhoods as they cut down or try to get to El Camino Real. Now, we do have a separate program. As many of you know, we have a slow streets program, which is currently on hold, which is really meant to address this type of issues where there is a cut-through occurrence and we're trying to discourage that activity from happening. So to answer your question, it is not currently being considered. However, we do have programs that can sort of address that issue when we get to that point. However, your point is very much well taken and something that's in the back of our mind as we continue this project forward. And to answer your second question, sorry, do you mind repeating?
Yeah, why does 2A actually increase the queue?
Oh, right. So in this case, now I will preface that the study they use a technical software. A lot of times, if you rerun the study 10 times, sometimes you get slightly different results. The parameters behind that study assume that the cycle stays the same. So you do expect, and because right now, both sides of Middle Avenue can go at the same time, right? So if you're coming from High 500 or if you're coming from the Safeway side, you can go at the same time. However, with a protective phase, your throughs movement cars now have to wait for the left turns to go first. So now there's some additional delay occur because of that operational change. Now, some of that could be offset with the demand from the left and the right, but generally speaking, when you're going from a permissive to a protected, you are increasing the number of phases within that signal. So therefore, there's more people waiting. There's more time for folks to wait, right? So that's generally the reason behind you would, again, generally see an increase in queue by going to a protective phase. And that the reason why we go with the protective phase is for the safety of that pedestrians crossing, because we're essentially resolving that left turn and pedestrian conflict.
So roughly, what's the queue did get longer, but is that 2 cars, 3 cars?
Yeah.
I know there's noise in the numbers. I understand that, but just from the picture, it looked, well, I'm not, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. So I'm gonna go ahead and look at the table here. So typically with something like this, you sort of assume about 22 to 25 foot per vehicle. So in this case, with 2A doing the Middle Avenue, so we're looking at northbound Middle Avenue. So we're looking at 2A, an increase of 330, so essentially 380 feet or so. So if you do that divided by 22, I don't have a good calculator. My brain is not that smart. But if you do, 380 divided by 22, you're looking at an increase of approximately 17 vehicles. So 17 to 20 vehicles. So that would be the equivalent of what you're seeing here. So looking at northbound Middle Avenue, between the red and the green, generally gives you about 17 vehicles right there.
That's huge.
That's a huge.
I mean, I drive that a lot,
Mhm.
and it often gets gridlocked. People coming out of Safeway, people making a left,
Mhm.
not all the time, but it may be worth some more analysis on that, because it gets pretty locked up all the way to Nealon, and when people are trying to back in at Nealon, it's kind of a jigsaw puzzle.
Mhm.
So at times.
Yep.
Now, not all the time.
Yeah, no, and to your point with your first question, right? Essentially, it's a trade-off. We recognize that the change in the signal operation will inevitably have a longer queue. And the advantage of doing so is to be able to resolve that conflict that we're trying to to resolve. So definitely recognizing that there will be a trade-off by doing so. And so this study was so we basically wanted to make sure that when we come to the commission, we have that number, right? So in this case, we're looking at approximately 17 vehicles going from existing to alternative 2A.
Okay, Commissioner Erica Moss?
Just a quick follow-up question. We're speaking in terms of distances at this point, but how long is the signal cycle? How many cars do you expect to be able to make it through a turn? How many cycles are we expecting people to be waiting at that intersection? Because if you wait one cycle, maybe that's okay, but if you're waiting 5 cycles, that's very frustrating.
Yeah, no, that's another great question. And I don't know if I necessarily have the scientific answer for you in this case. So I know the cycle length. The cycle length, I believe, is 160 seconds, if I remember correctly. So that's about 2.5 minutes, which not atypical for an intersection of that size. El Camino, Bayfront, your Big Willow intersection, for example. Big intersections is not uncommon to see a cycle length of 160 to maybe sometimes even 180, so essentially 3 minutes, right? In this case, I probably would anticipate folks that with a protected left maybe to wait, 2 cycles sometimes, especially if you are doing the higher peak hours, because if you think about generally, if you're making a left turn, in this case, we're trying to not lengthen the cycle length even more. So we're essentially borrowing time from other places. So in this case, we are borrowing some time along Middle Avenue. So in this case, one of the reasons why there's a longer queue. However, it's not, I would say based on my past experience, 2 cycle is probably fair to say. And again, I do want to highlight that this represents the 95% queues, right? So we're talking about 95% of the time within the hour. So, and that's not going to happen all the time, right? So that's why I wanted to highlight that if we were talking about, say, average queue, you can essentially half that distance right there. This kind of represents sort of the worst case scenario within that 95% of the time of an hour, right? So I do want to highlight that point as well.
Okay, I had a clarifying question about just a few quick ones. Table 1 where it says evaluation alternatives on Middle, I think it might be before this one.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to point out this one thing that caught my eye where when you have the protected left, the lanes on Middle change. So instead of having the lane on the left being a left and through, the lane on the left is solely a left turn lane. And then the lane on the right, instead of being a right turn lane, is a right and through. And I wanted to ask if that's because you don't want to have a protected left with people waiting, people stopping while people cross, also containing through traffic. Is that what it is?
Absolutely, yep. Mhm,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. And does that have any, if we do the protected lefts and we remark the lanes this way, does that have any other implications to the way we should, be thinking about the pros and cons of these designs? For example, if the lanes were designed the way they're pictured there on the right, and now the through person wanting to go straight is in the right lane, is it more difficult to not allow rights on left, or excuse me, rights on reds, because the through people might be behind someone who can't turn?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in this
Okay.
case, the analysis took that into account as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so part of the reason for some of the queuing that are happening now, we do have to kind of keep in mind that in this case, the through movements are vehicles that are essentially going into 500 El Camino Real. So there's I believe attachment B, if I remember my attachment numbers correctly, demonstrates the volume. Actually, I have it right here, so I can just share that with you as well. So you can see that the number of vehicles that are going through. So for example, coming from Olive heading towards 500
Oh.
El Camino, numbers are relatively low
Yeah.
in this
yeah.
case. So I think your point is valid. Those cars would certainly be impacted if there's no right turn on red operation that we want to implement, which now they have to wait for those cars, right? So however, the numbers are relatively low compared to.
I think
Yeah.
because the numbers were low of people going straight, I'm just wondering if you considered maintaining the lane that was left and through. They would be impacted, they'd have to wait like the left turn people would, but there are a few of them. And then the other alternative, if they get put on the right-hand lane, is that it sort of forces the argument around allowing a right on red. Like if we felt strongly that a right on red was going to interfere with the safety of people crossing in the intersections, but we've already made it more difficult to decide that because we've got these through cars like, hey, go, go, go. Why can't we put them back in the left? We're going to
Right.
inconvenience them one way or another,
Yeah. Basically, in order to have a protected left, you cannot have a sheer left through lane.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
So
thank
yeah, if the commission's desire is to
Okay.
have that sheer left through, which is the configuration to the left here, we would not be able to have that protected face.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. My second clarifying question is if you could go to the slides where it says morning commute time, evening commute time with those colored lines. One thing that wasn't clear to me was how, when we're looking at these lines, are we looking at 1 hour, the busiest 1 hour of commute times?
So in this case, you're looking at the morning commute hour. So each figure represent morning and evening peak hour. The lines represent sort
hour.
of the 95 percentile, which generally means you're looking at the busiest time. So let's say, a cycle, 0 cars waiting, and worst case scenario, 100 cars waiting.
Right.
95 percentile means 95 cars are waiting. So I don't know if that makes sense. You're looking at basically essentially kind of the 95% worst case scenario of the hour.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
right. And I was also trying to understand, like, are we looking at this in a 1 hour period?
1
or is
hour
this like in
period.
a 5 hour period, it's gonna be like this. And the
It-
reason
it
I
is
think
a
that's
1 hour.
important
Mhm.
is that when you look at something like this, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is just gonna be a nightmare. It's gonna be like this all the time, But if this is about illustrating the worst case scenario in a 1 hour period of the day.
You are absolutely right. If
that's
this
different.
represents 1 hour, the peak hour in the morning,
Yeah,
commute hour, and then the other figure represents 1 hour in the evening, where it's the peak evening commute hour.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if, I know you're moving to present this to city council soon, but I just wondered if there might be another visual where, or a chart even, where you're showing the impact like throughout the day, all day. And so you are given a sort of a bigger picture than just this one very difficult scenario.
Yeah,
That's not long lasting.
I see your point. With that being said, I think
Yeah.
with a study like this, or any type of traffic operational study,
Right.
if you will, I think generally what most people care about is the commute hours, because that's basically sort of the busiest time of the hour for folks. It's used by commuters.
Yeah.
In the morning, you have school children riding their bikes as well. So kind of from a industry standard perspective, whenever we do a study like this, we typically look at the commute hours, and then recognizing that outside of the commute hours, it could be, obviously, it won't be as bad as this. And there's generally, it's much more spread out outside of the commute
Right.
hours. There's really, and it's really usually, if, again, sort of the industry standards, we look at the commute hours.
I do think that would be useful information though. And I think it could go two ways. One is this could be worse, much worse, or it could be, is it only 50% worse? How much worse is it at, well, what is not a commute time, right? It's like 10 or 2 o'clock, say it's 10 a.m. or 2 p.m.
Yeah.
Is the rule of thumb that this might be half? It'd be interesting to know what the hypothesis is on that.
Yeah, sort of the general rule of thumb nowadays is your commute hours are typically representative of about 10 to 15% of your daily volume. That's
that's good to
kind of a rule of thumb. So your morning peak, your evening peak, so to speak, generally will be about 10 to 15. Sometimes if it's really, really congested during the hours, maybe 20%. So you're looking at essentially 2 hours that would be comprised of, say, 30 to 40%, or 30, in this case, 30 to 40% of your total daily volumes. And that's partially why, generally speaking, when it comes to a traffic operations study, you look at the peak hours, because if you look at past studies, you'll very, very much see a very high jump during those commute hours. During the non-commute hours, those volumes come way down. Even for a street, especially for streets like local streets, that's even more drastic compared to maybe like El Camino or Willow, where maybe the dip is not as drastic from the peak hours. Not to say there's no, I certainly understand sort of there's a value in understanding what that number is. However, that number doesn't really represent anything useful, in my opinion, because it's an average number that is between your peak, which is very, very much higher than any other hour of the day.
Okay. I just said 2 more very quick things. My first was, are there other kinds of, are there other alternatives that maybe are being used in other places with regard to right turn on red? For example, I believe, I hope, when I go to, in the mornings, when I'm going down Charleston East in Palo Alto and I get to Middlefield, I think there's a lit sign that basically is saying no right on red when there's pedestrians and bicyclists in the crosswalk or something like that. So I'm just curious if it's like a binary thing, like no right on red or yes, go ahead, or if there are alternatives being employed. I might not be articulating the right ones that exist, but out there that we could consider.
Yeah, no, there are definitely a lot of reasons that you can use no right turn on red for. In this case, the Palo Alto, the Charleston one, I believe it's used for the bike signal that's also there as well. So like I mentioned before, if you want to implement a bike signal, essentially you need to eliminate any conflicting vehicle movements, which generally means your right turn on red vehicles. So that's why there's that sign right there that says no right turn on red at Charleston. It's because of the presence of a bike signal.
Okay,
Mhm.
that's helpful. Very quickly, can we go to the chart that shows alternative A for, alternative 3 for a second? The one that shows all the alternatives?
Sorry, which one?
Where it was like 1, 2, 2,
Oh,
2A, and then
yeah, yeah.
3.
In this case.
Okay, so
Yeah.
3 is protected. No right. So no, is 3 no right turn on red
Mhm.
when someone hits the dedicated bike signal?
So in this case, we could potentially have it that way. Yes.
Uh-huh.
The study in of itself, I believe, is assuming no right turn on red, period.
Okay.
So because the study looked at bike phasing by itself. And then additionally, the no right turn on red is something that added on top of that. So to your point about, hey, can we have a no right turn on red only during the bike phase is on? Yes, we can potentially do that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks for that clarification. Yes, of course, Commissioner Bailey.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, just to, we have a couple Bayfront Expressway signals, so Bayfront and Choco, Bayfront and Chrysler, if I remember correctly.
Uh-huh.
I think that's how they operate. I think the no right turn on red comes on when there is a bike activation, if I
Interesting.
remember correctly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for letting
So
me
if
know.
you're looking for a local example, those would be kind of 2 to go to.
Would having no right turn on red timed be an option? For instance, coming out of the Willows, you can't turn right between, I think it's 3 and 7 p.m. Near MA, you can't turn right between, I think it's 7 and 9 a.m. I've never seen something like this at an intersection of this level. But would something like that potentially work, or is that something for less highly trafficked streets?
Right. It could work. It'll just be a static sign. It'll just basically be a sign that says no right turn during this hour, this hour. Unlike the one at Charleston where it only comes on when somebody activates. In this case, you under your scenario, it'll have to be a static sign because there's no way to have that dynamic functionality. Right. It's just an
Right.
enforcement issue at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Could I ask one more clarification, just
Yes, of
building
course.
on that? So I'm just trying to understand the dedicated bike signal phase and how it operates.
Mhm.
So is that predicated on somebody pressing a button, like a beg button? Is it a sensor like you have on Sand Hill Road in Palo Alto? Or is it just built into the timing and it runs 24 hours a day automatically?
Yeah, so since we're still conceptual level, I would anticipate that we want something that is either sensor or it would be demand activated. We wouldn't want that to be coming on all the time because obviously you'll kind of create a lot of delay from a vehicle standpoint. I don't know what the final product would be, depending on the design constraints. Maybe it's easier to have a push button somewhere. But I know the technology is out there where there's a sensor that you don't have to push anything. And we would certainly consider that as we kind of continue the design.
So just one quick follow-up.
Yeah.
So in the chart that showed the 95% confidence level for the increase in traffic,
Mhm.
that is only when the sensor has been activated or the beg button has been pushed, right? That's not in every case. That's only when one of those 330 cyclists who comes every day is at that intersection, presses the button, and then thereby slows down the car traffic. Is that right?
I would have to verify the actual, because that gets a little bit too technical for me to know definitively. I have to look at the, I probably have to talk to the consultant that did the study. My recollection is for alternative 3, they essentially assume a no right turn on red operation, period. Meaning even when the bikes are not activated, you still have no right turn on red. I would say it's probably more similar to alternative 1, where it's basically no right turn on red, period.
Ever, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, maybe we can turn to public comment if that's okay with everyone. And I want to commend the commission. I think we limited ourselves to the clarifying questions, which is hard to do sometimes. Yes, so Kevin, would you please call for public comments on this item?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So for virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment, you may engage the raise hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press 9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can step up to the podium to make your comment. I'm not seeing any raised virtual hands, so I return the meeting back to the chair.
All right then. Well, I would like to ask the commission for feedback, and just to quickly, I think it might be a good idea, Kevin, if you could go to your last slide before we begin the feedback, in the presentation where you said we want this type of guidance in the commission on the first item and this on the second. I think that might just ground everyone in what's expected. Thank you. Ooh, okay. Thank you, Kevin.
So I believe the chair, you're looking for
The very last one, this one, the next, yeah.
this one?
Yeah.
Right here, yep.
If you want to just go, so 4.
Right, so again, feedback that we're hoping to receive from the commission tonight on the signal operations, whether or not there's a desire to choose a preferred alternative to move
Mhm.
forward with. Again, there's some additional analysis that will need to be done. There'll be consultation with a Caltrans colleague to understand what the next steps are to actually implement this operation, potential alternative. So there's certainly a desire, at least on staff's perspective, to select a preferred alternative to move forward with. And then the geometric recommendations, just simply wanted to get some feedback from the commission. Does the design, does it address the feedback that we receive from the community? Meaning, that does it make it safer for the pedestrians and the bicyclists as they are crossing those crosswalks? And then taking into account those constraints, the utility relocations, the potential costs and schedule delay to the need to acquire public right-of-ways. Does that, taking into account the pros and cons, do we still want to continue moving forward with exploration of the conceptual design?
Thank you. All right, so before everyone starts giving feedback, maybe we throw up the slide with the alternatives so people can speak to that. Thank you so much. And then if anyone ever wants to switch to a map or this one, just let Kevin know. All right, so who would like to go first with feedback? Anyone? Anyone? That's crazy. I guess I will get the ball rolling. Okay, so the first thing I thought it was really fantastic, Commissioner Bailey, that you started off by saying, thinking about the future when all this is connected. I think that's one of the most profound responsibilities we have on a commission like this is to, because we have the privilege of looking at this information in depth, is on the behalf of other citizens of Menlo Park, just to say, what does the future hold? And having just seeing all the kids going up Santa Cruz and Oak Grove and everything else, and having my son I live on the west side of El Camino, and having him do some lessons at Burgess. I do think this underpass is going to be fantastic, and I do think it's going to be very popular. It's one of those things that you wish had been there the whole time. So I do think we're looking to the future for a lot of kids being able to walk and bike from neighborhoods on one side of El Camino to some of the recreational activities on the other. And of course, kids who live in like Linfield Oaks or whatever can now pop over and to our side, to this west side. So I think that it's really important to keep that perspective. The other thing is the problem we are trying to solve for a few times tonight. Kevin, you said, the feedback from the community about safety and et cetera. And although we haven't had public comment tonight, I will say that, and maybe Brian remembers this too, and Lisbeth, when we were getting feedback about Middle, a lot of people, even though they knew that we weren't not going to be able to address the intersection of Middle and El Camino Real at the time we talked about Middle Avenue, there were still a lot of comments about it and concern about the safety and the crossing. So I'm glad we're addressing this. I think it's really important. I think for me, when I look at the alternatives, I think ideally it would be protected left because we've got people in that long intersection and maybe it's a big gang of bikes or little kids and whatnot. And I think this is El Camino is a very high trafficked area and a lot of speed. So I think that's very important. I think that's pretty critical in my mind. I was trying to figure out whether, that's why I asked, alternative 3 was protected left with the bike signal. So was it protected left, okay, right on red, but bike signal with the right on red, could activate the right on red?
Yes,
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think to Commissioner Roscoe's point, while it is not a scenario that is currently studied, if there's a desire from the commission to add that, we can certainly bring that back. So meaning we can potentially have a 3A where we have that protected left turn phase to resolve the conflict point. We have a bike signal, and then the no right turn on red only comes on when there's a bike activation. We could potentially add that as a another study scenario. So meaning, you know, and I think it's, I think one point is certain. A bike signal will certainly increase the cycle time, meaning it will impact El Camino more compared to any other of the alternatives, which means it might be a little bit harder, or Caltrans might potentially say, reject that alternative. Now, not to say that we don't want to pursue it. If the commission would like to pursue that 3A, so to speak,
Yeah.
and present, say, 3A and another alternative, we can move forward with 2 alternatives. I think we're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And then present both options to
Yeah.
Caltrans and see how
Yeah.
receptive they are to this potential 3A alternative.
Well, I'll tell you where my brain was going in this, and you can kick the tires. So I do go through that intersection many, many times a day. And what I was thinking was, obviously there's a concern about backing up traffic by not allowing a right on red. You know, at different hours of the day, there's no reason not to make a right on red if just nobody's around. And we don't want people just sitting there fuming because that thing is just static, you know, 24/7. Also, Kevin, I was reminded of the fact that you have been working with Caltrans on that intersection at El Camino and Ravenswood and Menlo, where the pizza place is. And I don't think they liked the idea. We had proposed the idea of eliminating the right on red. If you're going south in El Camino, you want to make a right on red into Menlo. I think they had said, no. Am I wrong about this? I think Caltrans didn't like that so much.
They didn't like the idea more because we wanted to create a bulb out, not necessarily the elimination of the turn lane. Although I wouldn't say you're wrong. Anytime you're trying to change anything on El Camino,
right,
it's a hard sell sometimes.
Right. And I get that.
Yeah, given the volume at Ravenswood, I would be more leaning towards they might be receptive to eliminating that right turn for
Middle?
to increase for Ravenswood.
Okay.
To eliminate that right turn for the sake of having a bulb out, creating a safer environment for the pedestrians, because the volume there is pretty low. I do potentially see a successful outcome there. However, for Ravenswood, the issue that we're running into is that particular bulb out, Caltrans then came back to us and said, you need to do bulb out on all corners. And that's the reason why we ultimately eliminated the bulb out option for Ravenswood. But I think to your point about the right turn itself, it was more because of the bulb out than the
Thank you for
elimination.
clarifying.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, I was just trying to be sensitive to the idea that if you prohibited a right turn at all hours of the day, it may back up traffic in a way that's not necessary. If you made it something that could be activated, and that might make more sense. And I was in favor of the protected left. So that's where I am.
Couldn't an alternative to that be choose 2A and make a 2B where you allow the right turn on red except when there is the cycle flashing signal? Wouldn't that be a little clearer?
I'm sorry. So would you mind repeating kind of
I
the
think-
scenario
I
that you
think
have?
We're saying the same thing, but it
Mhm.
might be more streamlined and welcomed by Caltrans
Mhm.
if you put forth and go 2A and kind of make a 2B with the exception of right turn on red, except when the pedestrian and cycle signal is going.
Right, okay, yeah, I
Right?
see
Instead of
what
saying
you're
no
saying.
right turn on red,
Right.
say right turn on red, except.
Right, so in your scenario, so the no right turn on red would come on when say a pedestrian or a bicyclist activate the crossing.
Precisely. Any
Right,
activity in the crosswalk, a right turn is prohibited.
Okay.
However, otherwise it is permitted.
yeah, so it's kind of a hybrid between 2 and 2A, basically.
It's 2B.
Yeah,
It's 2B, yeah, it is 2B.
It's a
Because
new alternative.
You have to have the left turn protected to prevent the backup from
Mhm.
people coming out of Safeway. You've got to
Yes.
have a right turn on red to prevent the backup on Middle, but you
Right.
have to have the cyclists and pedestrians protected. all the
That
time.
that can be done from a signal operation standpoint, yeah,
I
that
think
can
it
be
is.
done, yeah.
Okay.
How would that look on that, would be flashing lights and stuff? And if so, could you do that on the north side of El Camino where people are crossing from, the east side to the west side? So there's some kind of
So from
treatment
Safeway to Shell
From Safeway,
Station.
Yeah, some type
Yeah.
of treatment on, because
Yeah.
when you make that left, and also maybe look at the lights in that area, the street lights themselves,
Right.
because it's pretty dark. But I'm just wondering, taking that idea, if you could add the flashing lights on that side as well, so it's kind of consistent, and then
Mhm.
people understand the behavior is different when the lights are flashing.
Yes, we could potentially do that. So in this case, the scenario that you're presenting then, so middle is essentially what Vice Chair King had mentioned, but on top of that, another flashing sign for the southbound right turning vehicles. So you're coming, say, down from Valparaiso along El Camino, want to make a right onto middle, that those cars would also not be able to turn right on red when it's activated. Right.
If it's only 20, 30 seconds for pedestrian to walk across.
It's a shorter crosswalk, right?
I do the math right, that's like 1 or 2 car loads, right? In terms of the queue, even during.
Right, yeah.
So it seems 1 or 2 car loads to go across.
Hmm. We could explore that, yes.
So some relationship between the time the pedestrian, has access to walk across.
Mhm.
How does it relate to queue?
Mhm.
In terms of seconds?
Yeah.
Seconds. Queue per seconds. Seconds.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from. It's a little harder to come up with that relationship sometimes, primarily because, and in this case, it's a little trickier for El Camino Real as well because it doesn't have a dedicated right turn lane. It's actually the lane is a share through right turn lane. So some of the impacts that you do, some of the right turn restrictions that you do there could potentially have a little bit of a compounding effect to the actual queue length itself.
But further down El Camino, almost from maybe Menlo Park, Redwood City, there's
Right.
that pedestrian cross.
Right.
Where everything's, stops.
Mhm.
And then for 20, 30 seconds, which is maybe a car or 2 or 3, in terms of the queue.
Right, yeah. We'll probably have to do a study, and you'll have to be specific to this location, given the volume and the turning volume, et cetera. I think that's certainly that if the commission as a whole has a desire for us to explore further, we could take that feedback and essentially try to come up with another alternative. I would be comfortable proceeding with 2 alternatives. I think 3 would be too much because at that point, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But I think 2 is a fair number. So we just probably want to come up with that, whichever one that we're choosing from the list, or maybe 2 new ones that we want to kind of do some sort of combination of each. Certainly open to that.
Commissioner Gomez?
So as I think there's people are thinking about this sort of push button request for a bike crossing that sort of lights up a flashing no right turn on red sign, which I think I mean, my experience with static no right turn on red signs is often that people ignore them and they're not effective. So something that lights up like that could even be more effective. But my question is, I think in the diagram that you have a little bit later, there is some protected waiting area for the bicyclists. But if you're a bicyclist and you just kind of sit, you kind of have to sit in the right turn lane and wait for the bicyclist signal to come on and the no right turn light to start flashing. That's I would just like some protection for the bicyclist or pedestrian at that point. If you're just kind of sitting next to moving traffic that may not see you.
We can certainly look into that. Our challenge with specifically, well, actually, the challenge would be similar for both El Camino and Middle as well, is that the amount of space out there, it's pretty much maximized. We can't really have any sort of curb extension, if you will, without starting to impede the number of travel lanes that's out there right now. There might be an opportunity along El Camino because there is a little bit of that extra extra width that we have. However, when it comes to El Camino, one thing that we're also trying to kind of look ahead is that El Camino Real bike lane project. And if I remember correctly, and do not quote me on this, I think any sort of El Camino Real bike lane scenario would almost guarantee that we need a full curb to curb distance. Meaning any sort of island structure that we built right now for El Camino would impede that bike lane in the future. Meaning we might have to take it out, right? So that would be kind of more that looking ahead thinking. If there's really a strong desire, we could always look at quick build alternatives. So I think that's something that we can take back to the drawing board and see if there's an opportunity to maybe do a quick build.
Couldn't you do like armadillos or those plastic things?
Yeah, I
That's
was
exactly
imagining
right.
this,
That's
the
exactly what I
plastic.
meant by
Right
the
there
quick
on
build
just on the
scenario.
middle part, not even on El Camino part.
Right. Yeah. We'll have to be a bit more careful with some of those because the turns are very tight right now. So the city, we did a conscious effort of tightening the corners when we improved this intersection because we knew that the prior design, cars were making those right turns really fast. So with the 500 El Camino Real project, we made a conscious decision to tighten up those current turn radius to slow those right turning vehicles down, which means there's really not that much more room for us to further reduce that corner. And I've personally witnessed many times a bus that's trying to make a right turn coming from southbound El Camino, and they have a tough time. They have to be really slow. They have to be very methodic just to make that turn successfully without running onto the curb. So any sort of even quick build projects, not to say that it can't be done, but there's going to be a lot of thought that needs to go behind it to make sure that it's a successful project. Otherwise, we'll probably be looking at a lot of cars not being able to make that turn successfully.
And you've got big trucks going in there to save fire. Maybe they're going in the back. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. And middle, obviously, it's a fire route as well. So we're
Okay.
talking about the fire trucks, the garbage trucks, those bigger, delivery trucks as well that will be using those turning corners.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
How's that going? Okay. One additional piece of context that I think is important for the commission to discuss and also to present to the city council when it comes to them is just how dangerous this intersection is. I pulled up the data, I'm going to share some of it, but also how dangerous right turn on red is. And I did a little study, just looked up the research on this. I think it's important to communicate both of those as we share this with others. So I looked at the past 10 years of data in the SafeTrack Berkeley database. There have been 40 people injured just at that intersection in 35 unique crashes at that intersection. One pedestrian was killed in 2019, May 2019. I couldn't find any news articles about that. But 76 people were involved in all of those crashes. 10 of them involved bicycles, 3 of them involved pedestrians. If you look at the 35 that just happened at that intersection, it's one of the most dangerous intersections in the city. And I don't think the background that was presented here sufficiently conveys that 5 years ago, somebody was killed here. I don't know that person's name, but they had a family. And like that it just, in the kind of dry bureaucratic way that we discuss this, I don't think we fully convey the impact that that has. And that's an enormous amount of damage that this is causing right now. And I think that has to come through, that has to be part of the discussion. On right turn on red generally, so here's the data that I was able to pull up, and I'm sure you can add to this from your education. The Insurance Institute of Highway Safety did a review of right turn on red. They found that they increase right turning crashes by 23%, but pedestrian crashes increased by 60%, and bicyclist crashes doubled, 100% increase when right turn on red is instituted relative to not having right turn on red. Another study, 1981, showed 55% increase in the number of pedestrian accidents at the very same intersections before and after when right turn on red is instituted. To me, this is not like a God-given right to turn right. I was in New York City, lived there for 10 years. There is no right turn on red. In the most impatient city in America, everybody waits at the signals because there are so many pedestrians. If you had cars turning on red, they'd be plowing through people and it would be far too dangerous. And I just think like at the very busiest intersections that we have in our city, like this one, where there have been 40 people injured in the past decade and 1 person killed, it's worthy of the attention that other big cities give this. I believe Davis does not have it. I believe Salt Lake does not have it. Like it's not absolutely necessary. So that's why I would favor 3, eliminate the right turn on red, maximize the protections for cyclists and pedestrians here, and absolutely pursue the geometry intervention here for physical protection for those who are crossing this. And if Caltrans shoots it down, so be it. But like we should advocate for what we want as a city. And I wouldn't consider it a con that they're going to push back on it. We should push back on their pushing back and advocate for the design that we believe in, not anticipate failure just because of their conservatism. Meanwhile, the leadership of Caltrans is changing. And they were much more aggressive in the bike lane study in Palo Alto than anybody had expected. That's all coming through. There's not going to be a bike lane in Mountain View in Palo Alto, and we're going to be a gap in that. And to me, like the promise of Middle Plaza and the Middle Avenue project, which we advocated for here and in the city council, depends on a few missing pieces in the puzzle. You made this point very well, Meredith. And this intersection is one of the biggest missing pieces. And intersections generally are the biggest problem in the city. The straightaways are okay. They need improvement. They need more bike lanes. But the intersections are where the data show that people get hurt the most. That's what the Safe Trek consultant study showed. And like this to me feels like an absolute opportunity for us to pursue the right design and not compromise in anticipation of negative feedback that we might get from others. Is that my mic drop moment?
I'm sorry, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I would make a motion in favor of option number 3 and the geometry. I don't know what to, how best to describe it. The physical protections at the corner, and to present that to the council if that is the next step as the favored option from the commission.
And do you, I think, Kevin, you said that you thought it was preferred to recommend 2 alternatives for the staff to look into? If there
Doesn't have to
is-
be. No,
doesn't have to be,
if there's a consensus to proceed with 3, we will certainly do so. And I think it sounds like if there's a desire to add another alternative, that 2B, I think that Commissioner or Vice Chair King had mentioned, you're more than welcome to do so, and we'll take that feedback.
And go ahead.
Just clarification on the motion. Is this 3 as it stands, which would ban right turn on red in 24/7, or is it 3, sort of 3A, which is kind of on demand, no right turn on red?
I would do a 24/7 for the compliance reasons, because I think the issues that you've seen around compliance are probably worse when people don't know what to expect. And I would just say, you just need to have a blanket rule. The compliance is not going to be perfect anyway. But I think we will increase compliance by just simplifying the process and just say, you don't turn on red, right turn on red. You can wait 160 seconds to make your turn, maximum.
My concern with that a little bit, I mean, I agree, it's a dangerous intersection. Don't want to move that danger though onto some of the side streets by backing up cars and having people behaviorally, and rightfully so, go, and all of a sudden now we've got cars going at speed down the streets where there's kids out there playing hoops. So yes, I'm just wondering if there's some way we can, in your analysis, include the danger of that, and also include, the impact as a pro and con to some of the side streets. Because from a Vision Zero and a slow streets perspective, it's those streets, right, that can become dangerous by just moving it around. So somehow contain it so it doesn't move.
I agree with that, and there was a comment to the commission to that effect also that I agreed with. But that to me also, it feels like let's address that as a standalone issue, and I think that is a standalone issue. That's the College and Partridge and Cambridge concerns, and all of those need traffic calming. I think they need modal filtering, which we're not doing right now. If you look at College Terrace in Palo Alto, they create dead ends, and they create they protect residential neighborhoods much more aggressively than we have done, and that deserves its own solution to prevent cut through. I think the Blake bollards are a great example of this. Blake Street's a delightful place to be right now, and to cross Middle, from Blake is great right now. So that to me feels like the solution, but we shouldn't kind of sell out Middle because we're concerned about those others. Let's address those directly.
Or somehow do it in conjunction or something.
Yeah.
Somehow, or some type of relationship. Otherwise, we're just moving up.
I have a clarifying question on all of this, since I'm a little bit less familiar with that particular stretch of Middle. How far is it from the intersection to the first like side street that you could cut off on? Like, do you have to know really far in advance while you're driving that you want to cut over? Or is it that you get to the traffic and you're sitting there for like in that queue and then you turn off?
Yeah, so in this case, because Blake is now no longer accessible, you would have to make that turn at University. So you have to go pretty far down. Now, as a resident of the neighborhood, a couple of times you'll recognize that, right? Someone that is passing through, they might not know. They might, and you'll be too late at that point, so to speak. But someone that lives in the neighborhood, a week or two, and if that situation persists, they'll recognize and they'll very easily know that, okay, I'm gonna make a right on University, gonna go down either College, Partridge, or Cambridge, instead of waiting on Middle.
Thank you.
So I think if there's a desire to modify the motion to do that 2B option, staff would certainly welcome that. It is currently not in the study scope. We do have to go back and look at our budget to make sure that we have enough budget to do an additional study. It's probably not too hard. So if there's a desire to add a scenario, I do want to add a little caveat real quick, because it's currently not budgeted to do another scenario. So we'll have to at least look at that first to see if there's any additional budget amendment required. Obviously, that will be a whole different animal that we need to address, but I do not want to let that be the reason for not taking that feedback from the commission.
I guess the one thing that wasn't clear with 2B, Commissioner King, was whether you were including the geometric
Oh, absolutely.
enhancements. She was, yeah. in that piece.
Yeah, and just to be clear, those two will be on separate timelines. We're not combining the two. They're just impossible. Yeah, but do take the feedback that we want to continue with that geometric improvement, but I do want to emphasize that we are not combining those two improvements at the same time. It's just
These are
impossible.
alternative, whether you went with a 2B with a right turn on red with exceptions,
Mhm.
or a 3. Either one would have to get through Caltrans.
Absolutely, yep. Anything that we do here will have to go through
So
Caltrans.
we can propose a couple of options that among all of us, somebody agrees on it, some may not. and we will
Exactly.
find the best option.
Hence, staff is comfortable with at least two options, presenting both options to Caltrans and see how that goes. I think that's certainly, we will be okay with that.
So it sounds like I mean, I'd be interested in any indication from the commissioners whether, fork in the road, there's either a desire to go with one motion or like 3 or 2B, or to make a motion to ask the staff to look into both of those for their council presentations. So is there a way that people can indicate whether they just would rather do 3 or 3 and 2B? Can we just have a quick straw poll around that?
Well, I mean, commissioners, you're more than welcome to, the chair, you're more than welcome to present that and just
I'd
get
like to
feedback.
consider 2B and 3, because I like the overlay of the Vision Zero. I think
Okay.
your point is very compelling.
Similar to
Yeah.
B and 3.
2B and
with
3?
The addition of the pushback on Caltrans,
Yeah.
just don't accept the no.
Can I ask another clarifying question? I apologize. With the middle complex, like coming online soon, I assume that those children, any students, elementary school age students there would be heading to Oak Knoll. Is that correct?
They're going to Laurel as far as.
Oh, they're ours. Amazing. Okay, I was wondering how that would impact middle as well. Okay, thanks you, Matthew.
So Commissioner Eric, do you have a feeling, would you support them looking into 3 and 2B? Is that?
Yeah, I guess.
both the-
I am more supportive of 3, I would say, but I would also support research into 2B.
Okay, so does someone want to make an alternate motion of including both? Is that you, Commissioner King?
Yes.
Okay, can you say them?
So procedurally speaking, we do have a motion on the table. I don't remember if we have a second. Is it Commissioner Irakomo? Were you the second to Commissioner Raskoff's?
I don't
Motion?
think that we had a second for that.
Okay, so I think what I would recommend is let's get a second on the table, and then Vice Chair King's would be a friendly amendment to the motion. And then if the motioner and the seconder agree with that, then that becomes the motion itself. I
Do you
think.
need a second to get a friendly amendment?
I believe so. I believe we need a second just to have that conversation going, because we can have more conversation, which we already had, but just more for procedurally speaking, we should have a second, and then a friendly amendment to the motion. Because technically, I don't think we're supposed to have discussions until there was a second on the table.
I can second it.
Yeah, so, okay. And then Vice Chair would be kind of the friendly amendment to the original motion, which I believe is the addition of a new alternative to B, so to speak. Right? And then with the motioner, in this case, Commissioner Roscoe, would you be acceptable?
I accept that as
Okay.
an alternative.
And then the seconder?
Yeah, I also accept.
Okay, so now we have this new motion on the table for vote. And I want to clarify that staff on our end, we do have to go back and look at the budget and see if there's adequate budget from the existing remaining budget to see if we can cover that additional work. If it doesn't, we'll probably just come back as an info item or something like that to kind of make sure that the commission is aware of what that next step will be, depending on whether or not we have the budget to cover that additional analysis. Does that make sense? Does that sound like a plan? Because I don't want to promise that we can do another study scenario without knowing that we have the money to do so. Yeah. Okay. So clear as mud. If commissioners that would like any additional discussion, questions on the motion itself?
Can we explicitly state out what 2B is?
Thank you, yes. So in this case, to staff's understanding, 2B would essentially be alternative 2A, which is protected left with right turn on red. However, protected left with no right turn on red when pet or bike is activated. And in this case, we're talking about pet and bike that are trying to cross El Camino Real. When that crossing is activated, the Middle Avenue right turning vehicles would not be able to go. Is that correct? Okay, great. So with that, commissioners that would like to vote yes to the motion, if you can please raise your hand. I'm seeing all hands raised. Thank you very much. I don't think so. I think the commission as a whole all agree to proceed, at least just keep exploring that geometric improvement. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so no, it's just part of that motion. Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you. Moving on to informational items. Under informational items, city staff provides an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a commissioner, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. The first informational item tonight is update on major project status. Kevin, do you have any updates?
Yes, I do have a few updates for the commission. So some of you who've been through Willow and Newbridge last Tuesday, you might have noticed there was a significant queuing, and that was due to the signal upgrade that we did, we, the city did, at Willow and Newbridge. So I'm happy to report that after hours of being there, we finally were able to upgrade the signal cabinet, the signal controller, the new phasing also was implemented. So now, kind of similar to what we talked about today at Middle and El Camino, there's now no longer a conflict at Willow and Newbridge where the left turning vehicles are conflicting with the pedestrians walking, crossing Willow. So happy to announce that after that, now that conflict has been removed.
Great.
Yes. So,
About the queuing on Willow?
yes.
Was that during the planned downtime of that project? I know there were signs the signal was dark and there were police there directing traffic.
Right.
Did that occur at the planned time for that? Or was it supposed to happen like earlier in the day or something like that?
So it definitely started on time. However, there was some unforeseen wiring issues that extended the time.
Okay.
I think we were anticipating Monday night from 9 p.m. to Tuesday around 1 p.m. at the latest. However, we were not able to wrap up all the work until I believe 6 p.m. that day, and the additional hours were due to some unforeseen wiring issues that we ran into.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Mhm. Yep.
If that's all, Kevin, would you like to call for public comment?
Oh, actually, just a couple more updates real quick for El Camino Real and Ravenswood, that crossing improvement. Just wanted to update the commission that we're still working with the Caltrans on the maintenance agreement. Once that's done, then we'll be able to proceed with getting the encroachment permit, which then hopefully means we can finalize our design and move into construction in the hopefully near future. Also, Haven's streetscape. Some of you might be aware of the project. It's District 1. The project itself was to have there's a sidewalk gap right now on Haven, or not right now, previously a sidewalk gap on Haven Avenue. On this, I guess the east side of Haven, from where the Tyson canals to Marsh. So if you're someone that's living in the apartment complex along Haven, there's no continuous sidewalk that would allow you to get to Betwell Bayfront Park. Happy to announce that the project that went under construction sometime last year, actually, no, I think back, I think it's middle of sometime earlier this year, is now 99% complete. So now when you're out there, you'll see a continuous sidewalk on one side of Haven Avenue that will take those apartment residents all the way to Betwell Bayfront Park with a safe sidewalk. Additionally, we were also able to complete the bicycle gap for that section as well. So that there's
great.
a missing bicycle gap
Oh,
from
great.
Haven Court to
Mhm.
Bayfront Expressway or
Mhm.
Marsh in this case. So again, through that project, we were able to kind of complete that gap. So happy to announce that the project is 99%, 95% done.
That's great.
Yeah. Mhm. With that, I will conclude my update.
Thank you, Kevin. Can you ask for public comment on those items?
Thank you. So for virtual attendees who wish to provide public comments on the two info items, you may engage the raise hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press 9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. Seeing no raised hands, I will return the meeting back to the chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item F2, which is tentative complete streets commission agenda. Kevin, do you have any updates on that?
None, thank
All
you.
right, thank you. All right, then we'll move to committee subcommittee reports. Does anyone have any update on work they would like to report?
I would love to. Myself and Commissioner Eric Komos are working on a bike rack inventory in the city of Menlo Park. We have put together sorry, you've caught me off guard and now I'm pulling it up.
You know, I'm very pleased that you're doing this.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. What we've done is we've put together a survey that we want to get out to community members in Menlo Park through SurveyMonkey is how we're anticipating doing it, / paper copies, to see like, where are people going? How are they getting there? When they get there, are there sufficient bike racks? Are they well lit? Are they within a certain proximity to businesses? We recently met with some friends over at Coffee Bar in downtown Menlo Park, and it was kind of funny. Everybody was locking their bikes up to trees right next to the building because the one and only staple bike rack was 100 feet away on the absolute intersection of Oak Grove and whatever that other street is. It was not in proximity nor convenient to any of the local businesses. So that's the type of thing that we're trying to find, that we want to rectify. As we're trying to encourage people to use active transport, we want to make sure that it is attractive to leave your source of transportation, your bike, whether it be a cargo bike, recumbent, a nice road bike, a commuter bike, that there's somewhere safe to leave it. That's not a big hassle. We want that to be really encouraging. What we would love to do is perhaps charcoal, actually not exactly sure how this works, but if we send the questions that we've compiled through you and or Kevin to the rest of the committee, to the rest of the commission, excuse me, to get feedback, we would love to see if we're kind of hitting the nail on the head, or if this group would have further input for us.
I think that's a great idea, and we can also ask people to write them back separately and not CC all, and that way we can avoid everything. One comment I would have is, and I know you mentioned this to me before, but one of the complexities is the different kinds of bikes people, because you were telling me about people with little, what are those called? Pulleys or?
The chariots? Like
Yeah, the chariot
behind them?
bikes. Yeah, yeah. And how when people go over to something like a Cafe Baroni or someplace, there are a lot of families, those tend to fill up space. And of course, e-bikes have different. So maybe there's some requirements for different kinds of, inventory rack. I would be very happy to volunteer in that project in any way. If you want me to send me out counting up bike racks, I'm happy to do it. One thing I just wanted to say, we're talking about, what's that, bike racks? Oh, yes. One thing I love about this project is that as we do talk about development in downtown or Parkline or whatever, like developing expertise around this is really critical. And I think will give you both a really good voice to go and talk about downtown development, about the importance of bike racks and what you've been finding and getting that issue and that need early into the planning. So good work. All right, then. Well, before we adjourn, I would just like to tell members of the public that our senior staff engineer, Kevin Chen, is leaving us for a different role. And so this is his last meeting with us today. And I just personally, and anyone else can chime in, but just wanted to make sure I let the public know how grateful I am that for all the work you've done. I've worked with you for almost 4 years. And you know, I talked to a couple people on the city staff, and they all said the same thing about you know, your positive attitude and your professionalism. And one of the things I want to say is that I've always really appreciated how you make yourself available to the public to answer questions. And I've always been surprised when there's been you know, debates and things. You always say, well, here's my email address, reach out to me. And you really mean it, because when I first started on this commission, I reached out to you a lot. You always spent time with me. So thank you, Kevin, for your service. I'm thinking of all the different projects you've worked on over the years and all that you've accomplished, and you've really made a great impact on the city. So thank you for your service.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the kind words. It's been a privilege to work here, and yeah, started out 9.5 years ago, I think, almost. So
Wow.
yeah, a lot of changes within the city of Menlo Park, positive changes,
Yeah.
for sure. So yeah, it's been a privilege. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for all you've done, and they're lucky to have you. All right, with that, I will adjourn the meeting, I'm afraid, at 8:34 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.